All right, guys. So it was a nice, juicy Mayweather-McGregor preview show. Things were going swimmingly. And then we decided to check the internet and see that Jon Jones has gotten himself into a bit of trouble. So we thought, well, we need to bring somebody on to discuss this with. We need somebody who can react accordingly. And we thought, you know what? There's only one man for the job. You know him from his work on MMA Weekly. He works for Flow Combat at the moment. He did great work on Fox Sports. And he, most importantly, was part of the legendary Buffet team of 2016. He is none other than Damon Martin, and he comes back on the program. Damon, welcome. Welcome back. How you doing?
Oh, thank you for having me as always, guys. I really appreciate it. I cannot wait to tackle some more buffets in the future.
They'll happen one day. But in the meantime, in the interim, let's tackle this. Jon Jones failed an in-competition drug test relating to his fight against Daniel Cormier at UFC 214 on July 29th. Got a few notes here. We of course have to include the details. Obviously, according to the UFC's official statement, the sample was collected after the official weigh-ins on July 28th. TMZ at the moment, at this present time, have reported that he has been stripped of the title. However, Dana White reportedly told ESPN that that has not been decided yet. Of course, he has not been suspended. Everything is sort of in the provisional stage. And the UFC have officially confirmed this news on their website. TMZ are also reporting that the substance Jones tested positive for was Turinabol, an anabolic steroid, and it is, of course, Jones' second failed drug test, the first one being prior to UFC 200, which was also meant to be a fight against Daniel Cormier. Now, Damon, obviously an enormous blow for what has been some very, very tough and troubling few years for Jon Jones. How do you react to this? What is your immediate reaction to this news? I believe you're watching the Tuesday Night Contender series, just chilling, and then this pops into your lap.
Yeah, I mean, what a crazy turn of events. And really, it's unreal. I guess the two words that come to mind are unreal and just heartbreaking. Heartbreaking for everybody involved, especially Daniel Cormier. I mean, the guy goes out there. I thought he won the first two rounds, although it was, I believe it was the first round was really close, but, he definitely won the second round. I scored him winning both rounds. And then he gets head kicked and finished. And man, what a performance from Jon Jones. And then here we sit a few weeks later and this news comes out there. I mean, it's just devastating all the way around. And for Jon Jones, of course, I mean, I don't want to convict the guy, again, not the whole story's out there. The TMZ report says it was steroids. Not to say I don't believe them in any stretch of the imagination, but we don't, we haven't heard that from Jon Jones. We haven't heard that from USADA. But assuming that's true, then it's devastating. I mean, listen, Turinabol is not something that I would assume. I mean, I'm not an expert necessarily, but I've done enough of these drug testing cases over the years to know that Turinabol is not something that just typically slips into a supplement. Or what I would imagine. And even if it did, I can't imagine USADA is going to say, oh, well, it's okay. You test positive for steroids. We're only going to give you a really small suspension. I just have a hard time believing that. So it's just unreal. I mean, everything Jon Jones has been through, and then to come back and have kind of that crowning moment. And then he did everything right afterwards. I mean, he did everything right afterwards. He paid tribute to Daniel Cormier. He kind of settled the rivalry and said, the guy's a true champion and a real role model for the sport. Did all the right things, started building towards the big mega fight with Brock Lesnar. I mean, he was back on top of the world, and he had done everything right to get there. And then this comes out, and it's just, man, I tell you what, it's like one step forward and 8 steps back for Jon Jones.
And I'm just curious, before we get to our thoughts, are you a little bit surprised by the fact that it's TMZ that released this? As, traditionally, TMZ is sort of, I guess for lack of a better term, kind of in bed with the UFC. They have a good relationship. The UFC gives them scoops, they give them exclusives, and it's usually just more, I guess, positive things to do with fight promotion. Are you surprised that they're the first ones reporting this?
No, and listen, I know some of the guys at TMZ. I've worked with them before, especially when I was at Fox, because obviously Fox has a television partnership with TMZ, and they're actually, people, like to slam on TMZ because they're, kind of that tabloid style journalism, but they're actually a bunch of really, really good guys over there. As I said, I dealt with them on a lot of stuff when I was at Fox. They helped me out with some stuff. I helped them out with some stuff. So they are good guys. I would imagine, and again, I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, I would imagine this news probably did come from the UFC. Typically things like this don't come out. It didn't come from Jon Jones. I know for a fact Daniel Cormier didn't know about it until he was texted the news by a journalist. And I actually just texted DC a little bit ago myself. So I know he didn't know about it. So I got to assume this came directly from the UFC, in that kind of a situation. As far as the steroid, that part of it, that is kind of interesting because that typically will not be released by anybody unless unless the fighter releases that information. So again, so I can't say for certain how it came, but I have to imagine that they at least confirmed something with the UFC before putting it out there.
Mm-hmm. And also the strip title thing, which hasn't been confirmed yet. And the journalist that you were mentioning is, of course, Ariel Helwani, who also tweeted that he reached out to DC MMA. He said that he will provide a statement soon, but he's just processing it right now, and he's shaking, and there's disbelief there. So a big hit for DC, and I believe he's doing a UFC tonight, or some kind of broadcast tonight as well. So interested to see what comes out of that. But there was also a statement made by Jones's team where they said, we're all at a complete loss for words right now. Jon, his trainers, his nutritionists, and his entire camp have worked tirelessly and meticulously the past 12 months to avoid this exact situation. We are having the samples tested again to determine the validity or source of contamination. Jon is crushed by the news, and we are doing whatever we can as a team to support him. I'm just wondering what you guys think of that statement, Casper. When you hear that, I'm looking at a couple of things here. I'm looking at the fact that they're obviously looking to get the test done again to determine the validity or source of contamination. But when you look at that sentence, does it almost seem like there could be a good chance that they're realizing there's something that went wrong in preparation that may have potentially caused this contamination?
I'm sure that that's probably what they'd be leaning towards, because really, if you are going to test positive for a steroid or any kind of PED, best case scenario is it got in there somehow accidentally. Now, and I think Damon sort of hit the nail on the head. We don't really know the details yet. I do have some notes here, some facts about what Turinabol is and what exactly it does. But yeah, I guess if you're Jon Jones's team, the plea is, and it's kind of, like with Yoel Romero, when he failed his drug test, it was in the protein or the creatine or whatever powder he was using. And so with Jon Jones, it was in a sex pill. He thought it was Cialis, and instead it was something else. So I guess that's kind of the story they're going to go with. And I'm not, I don't know Jon Jones's team. I'm not going to sit here and say that he was taking steroids on purpose. But yeah, if you're going to go with anything, you're probably going to go with the fact that, look, I didn't take it knowingly, and it could be in something. And you know what? Like, it is entirely possible. Again, I'm not a chemist. I'm not an expert on these things. Apparently, Turinabol, it was discontinued, I believe, after 1994, and it's sort of strictly a black market underground anabolic steroid. So there are a lot of ways where athletes could sort of, take it, whether they're having designer steroids made for them, or whether it's in something, say, a product that you can buy at GNC or any other shop, and maybe they're putting that in there to increase the effects. I don't know. You would think that with Jon Jones, he's obviously and if he does have nutritionists, which he obviously does, you would think they would sort of do their due diligence, and you would assume that they have done, and check that everything is up to scratch, especially after what happened at UFC 200. So I think even if it is a case where something had something in it that it shouldn't have had, I think it's going to be very, very hard to sort of prove that, look, it was another accident. I think that any kind of committee would look at it and say, look, it's your job to check that everything is up to scratch and doesn't have any kind of PEDs in it. Yeah, that's right. I mean, there is no real excuse for this, no matter whether it's something that was contaminated or not. To me personally, I'm shocked like DC is to see this news. I think, the time of it coming together is just horrible for Jon. It seemed like he bounced back. Things were going well for him. Everybody was, really big on him. And in a lot of ways, he was, a big thing for the UFC. He's still a young guy and was looking to be their biggest star with a potential fight with Brock Lesnar down the line. And I just, this kind of seems to me, and I don't know, I want to get your thoughts on this, Damon, but to me, it kind of seems like almost the final blow. I mean, okay, just like Casper said, let's say, something was contaminated. That is no excuse. He's got a team of people working tirelessly to make sure this doesn't happen again, and it's happened before. We'll talk about a possible suspension here, but to me, I mean, it's almost becoming comical. I mean, when I saw the response from the fans, and of course, the MMA community can be a little bit critical, but people were just basically, they couldn't believe that it happened again. And I mean, reputation is something that is definitely not going towards Jon Jones here. He's had a very, very difficult run with a lot of horrible things happening to him. So this popping up, I mean, even if somehow down the track this thing is cleared, which I don't think, we don't know the facts, but it doesn't look likely that this thing will be cleared. But let's say
down the track it is clear, just dealing with this for the next few months. Fans are not giving him the benefit of the doubt here, Damon. How are you feeling with this? Does it kind of feel like the final blow here? Are we looking at a potential, is this a career ender for Jon Jones if it goes through?
Well, I mean, like I said, a lot of facts still have to play out. I mean, we know that. So I don't want to completely convict him, but I mean, it's not looking good. I mean, with everything else that's happened, considering the past suspensions, the hit and run accident, and then the positive test last year, which, they proved it was a contaminated, erectile dysfunction drug, all those kind of things. And then he comes back and he has this, tremendous performance, wins by knockout and all those kind of ththings. I mean, if this comes out to be true and everything plays out the way it's looking like, which is, he tests positive and it is steroids. I mean, will he be able to come back? Maybe, but I have a hard time believing that USADA is not going to drop the hammer in terms of a suspension. If all this is true, I mean, repeat offenders are supposed to get, an even stiffer penalty. So I'd have a hard time believing that he wouldn't get, he got a year when they proved it was a contaminated erectile dysfunction drug. I have a hard time believing that they wouldn't hit him with a, probably 2 or maybe 3 years suspension. I mean, I'm just spitballing at this point. And if that's the case, I mean, that's not a death sentence necessarily, but it certainly doesn't help his matters coming back. I mean, if he comes back 3 years from now, what kind of a division does he come back to? I mean, Daniel Cormier is 38 going on 39. I can't imagine he's going to be around for 3 more years. Guys like Alexander Gustafsson and Volkan Ozdemir will probably still be around, but I don't know. Like I said, I mean, this may be the nail in the coffin, so to speak, especially if he gets a 3 or potentially even a 4-year suspension. That's not quite a death sentence, but it's pretty close to it.
Yeah, it's insane. And you mentioned, obviously, the UFC's light heavyweight division. And that's the thing. He might be, if it is proven that he's positive, and like you mentioned, so many things have to play out. Really, this news just broke. Who knows what's going to happen? But, I mean, it could be 2 years. It could be 4 years. And if he comes back, he's 30 years old now. If he comes back at 34 years old, think about the UFC and any division or just the landscape in general 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I believe GSP was still champion. I believe Anderson Silva might have still been champion. If you think about how much has changed and how much Jon Jones may potentially change in 4 years, I mean, if he is what he is at the moment, which a lot of people have, believed him to be the greatest of all time, or if not, at least up there in contention for the greatest of all time. And if he's on the sidelines for 4 years, is he going to be continuing training? Is he still going to be dedicated to martial arts? There were moments where he revealed in that telling interview a year or two ago with Ariel Helwani, where he thought about, I believe it was after the hit and run, where he thought about just walking away from MMA. And he decided not to. And it's just crazy if he does get a 4-year suspension, what exactly happens to him. And like you mentioned, the division, people were talking about the light heavyweight division sort of being not necessarily dead, but people were talking about how Cormier and Jones, it's the best thing going in the light heavyweight division. Who knows what's going to happen afterwards? Yeah, we have Volkanovski. Yes, we have Gustafsson. But if Jon Jones leaves, and like you mentioned, Daniel Cormier potentially leaves shortly afterwards or goes to heavyweight, it's just nuts. And I want to read a couple of notes we've got here on Turinabol. Again, we don't know if this is the actual drug that Jon Jones tested positive for. That's what's being reported. But it was a big part of the East German doping machine between 1974 and 1989, where Olympic athletes were using it, and it was undetectable. Like I mentioned, apparently has not been manufactured since 94. Now it's a black market underground anabolic steroid. And as far as the effects, according to steroid.com, without a question, the effects of oral Turinabol will be most valuable to the athlete, and by athlete we mean actually an athlete. The use of oral Turinabol will significantly promote muscular endurance. They won't tire out as fast, and their overall rate of recovery should be greatly improved. As the season wanes on, they should also find they have taken less of a beating and are closer to the physical peak they enjoyed at the beginning of the season. This would not occur without the anabolic protective nature. The athlete should also find that his strength is noticeably improved upon, and yeah, he will be stronger, which can directly translate into physical power and speed. So, pretty crazy stuff. Dennis, any other thoughts on this insane out-of-nowhere situation?
Well, it's crazy. And now social media posts from the build-up to the Jon Jones DC fight are sort of popping up to Jon Jones right now. I mean, there was a tweet that he put out July 22nd at 2:53 a.m. I suppose, Australian time, where he posted a photo of himself and says, Daniel says the only reason I defeated him the first time is because I must have been on steroids. Wonder what his excuse will be this time. So a bunch of stuff like that going around the internet, no doubt about it, fans sort of turning it around, reposting it, talking about it. But Damon, I'm curious, from your perspective, I mean, to me, a huge blow for Jon Jones. He's going to lose millions of dollars. It's going to be difficult for him in his personal life. It's going to be hard for him to bounce back from this. Obviously, I think he'll come back if everything goes through, if he is convicted, if the proof is there. Again, we don't know. We're still speculating. I think he would come back 34, 35, whatever the age will be, and I think he'll still be able to fight a few more times. But the huge blow here is for the UFC, who has a thin division right now, and Jimmy Manuwa losing UFC 214 certainly didn't help that one bit. So I'm just wondering, Damon, when you're looking at this situation, again, we're speculating here, but let's say, it goes to the next step. And just as TMZ reported, Jon Jones is stripped of the title. And, the UFC is trying to figure out what happens next. Damon, I'm just wondering what makes sense. Who becomes champion? What happens in the interim?
I think from what I'm hearing, even though the TMZ report may have been a little bit early. From what I'm hearing is that the title being stripped and the title going back to Daniel Cormier is something that is probably going to happen. And if that happens, then Daniel Cormier would obviously come back and defend the title. Now you have to remember, even though Daniel Cormier may be champion now, he also did get knocked out in the third round by Jon Jones. So, whether or not he'd actually be ready to come back this year is a big question. I mean, I had heard rumors that Jon Jones was going to, come back before the end of the year, was looking at potentially the end of December or the beginning of December, UFC 218 or UFC 219 as a possible landing spot. I don't know that DC would be ready. I mean, he did get knocked out pretty hard in the third round. So I think what's probably going to happen right now is you're going to see maybe a number one contenders bout between Alexander Gustafsson and Volkan Ozdemir maybe later this year in December. And the winner of that would go on to face Daniel Cormier. Because listen, even if Jon Jones, let's just say hypothetically Jon Jones is exonerated, which I think we all know the likelihood of that is pretty slim, especially if it is, Turinabol. And again, this is all speculation. I don't want to throw the guy under the bus because we don't know all the facts yet. But if that is the case, then I have a hard time believing that this situation is going to be resolved within 6 months, and that's at a minimum. These things don't typically happen that quickly, especially when you're talking about retesting samples, arbitration, all these different things that can happen. So if that's the case, like I said, I truly do believe we're looking at probably a number one contenders bout between Gustafsson and Ozdemir, and the winner of that fight in DC in early 2018, with this Jon Jones situation playing out with USADA. And depending on, like I said, I mean, if he tested positive for pretty much anything, and it is a steroid. I mean, I just can't see him coming back with less than a year or maybe even a 2-year suspension, considering it would be a second offense. I can't. Now, like I said, tainted supplements, all these different things that can happen. I guess there's some claim of that, but I just have a hard time believing that USADA is going to hand him a slap on the wrist and say, okay, go back out there and fight for the title, or, you're exonerated. I just have a itchy feeling this is not going to end well for Jon Jones.
It's amazing. And really, even though he was exonerated after UFC 200, people were still calling him a cheater. And this really, even if he gets exonerated now, it really doesn't help. I mean, people still call him a cokehead. People still call him a cheater. And it's crazy the way Jon Jones's career, it's been so storied. You said, I think, when we just jumped on the line before, you can't write this shit. And it's always been the case that you have this feel-good moment with Jon Jones, and then unfortunately something pretty tragic happens. And I don't know, I always think back to that quote from Mike Winkeljohn where he says that if anybody, the only man who can stop Jon Jones is himself. And again, we don't know what's happened, but once again, it's not an opponent, defeating Jon Jones. And not to say that he's defeated yet, but it's something within. Let's move along. It's an insane situation, but let's be honest. Let's be real. It is fight week. It is all about Mayweather-McGregor. Maybe 1% less now, but predominantly about Mayweather-McGregor this weekend. And let's get your vibe, Damon. How are you feeling about this fight? Are you pumped? Are you excited? And let's get an official prediction while we're at it.
I'm ready. I'm just ready for the fight. I mean, all the talking, all the conversation, all the build up, all the promotion. The confrontation today with Paulie Malignaggi and the teams and all that stuff, and it's great. I'm just ready for the fight, man. I'm just excited to finally sit down and watch these two go at it. It's been a couple of months in the making, and at this point, over a year in rumor. I mean, the first rumor came out in March of last year after the Diaz fight, after the first Diaz fight. So we've been talking about it for well over a year and a half at this point. So I'm just ready for it. As far as the prediction goes, listen, I understand the safe bet is Floyd Mayweather by decision. I mean, the guy is 49-0 for a reason. He's not typically a power puncher. And I think in a weird way, the 8-ounce gloves may end up hurting him a little bit because his hands are kind of brittle. And obviously with less padding means you do take more damage on your hands. So that actually may hurt him a little bit. And he's just not typically a finisher. If he does finish Conor, I think it'll be late, 10th or 11th round when maybe Conor's cut up or beat up and he just kind of finishes him, in the corner with punches and the referee separates him. But I think Floyd by decision is the safe bet. That being said, very few people are going to go out on a limb, and I guarantee you probably talked to everybody on your show tonight. Not a single person went on a limb and actually picked Conor McGregor. Well, guys, I'm going to be that guy. I'm picking Conor McGregor. I'm done. I stopped not believing in this guy a long time ago. There's just something about it, something about the matchup, something about the confidence, something about the way things have been playing out. Just, I don't know, just something in the air. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the Jose Aldo fight where I just had a feeling that it was going to happen. And so I think it's going to happen. I'm picking Conor McGregor by third round knockout.
Wow, you're in good company because actually you're in really good company because not only are you with Chris Weidman, who last week picked the same thing, Although I don't know what it was. I think he was still recovering from surgery and was a little bit out of it when he said that. I think he just threw it out there. But also, Bas Rutten also said the same thing. I don't think he said third round. I think he said fourth round. But he's also predicting Conor McGregor KO. I'm just curious, when did that change for you? Because I think that initially you were sort of leaning towards Mayweather when we spoke about this, over the last few weeks and months. When did it change for you and you started thinking, all right, I'm going with McGregor?
There's just, the lead up, watching the footage and watching, and just listening to Conor. And I know talk doesn't win you fights. I understand that. But when I see some of the training footage and I just see, how much Conor is putting into this camp. And listen, we can sit here and criticize his technique all day long and say the guy doesn't have the best boxing technique and he doesn't hit pads as cleanly as Floyd Mayweather. But guess what? A lot of guys aren't going to do that as well as Floyd Mayweather. But this isn't going to be a boxing match. This is going to be a fight. And that's where I think Conor has a chance to win this thing. He's going to go out there and make it dirty. He's going to make it ugly. When I say dirty, I don't mean like he's going to fight illegally. I just mean he's going to make it a grimy fight. He's going to go out there and get in Floyd's face, put that left hand out there and beat him up a little bit. And I think that, Floyd hasn't faced that a lot of times. Guys who have gone out there and tried to beat Floyd Mayweather have typically tried to go out there and outbox Floyd Mayweather. And Conor can't do that. No one has. No one can, I don't believe. That's why I think a lot of people were always interested in that Golovkin fight, the Triple G fight, because Triple G hits with such freakish power, and obviously he's a lot bigger than Floyd too, so that was another factor, but so is Conor. But I think that was a big factor why so many people at the end of Floyd's career were like, man, I'd kind of like to see that Triple G fight, because Triple G hits with just tremendous fight-stopping power, and Floyd really hasn't faced a lot of those guys in his career, and I think that's what you're getting with Conor McGregor. He has real fight-finishing power, and I think Floyd is absolutely underestimating him. I know the videos are out there showing him eating Burger King and not training, and a lot of people are saying that's just a picture he's painting. He wants people to believe that he's not taking this seriously. But there's just something about it that I think maybe he is not taking this seriously. Maybe he just thinks he's going to walk through Conor McGregor. This is going to be a 50th win and a $300 million payday. And I think that's a dangerous game to play when you're fighting somebody as good and as dangerous as Conor McGregor.
All right, well, we'll all find out this weekend, August 26th in America, and here, August 27th. This Sunday here in Australia. Damon, we really appreciate your time, really appreciate you jumping on, chatting with us about, obviously, this Jon Jones situation that popped up out of nowhere, giving a really nice prediction as well for McGregor Mayweather. Guys, don't forget to follow Damon on Twitter, at Damon Martin. Of course, check out his phenomenal work, as always, on MMA Weekly and Flow Combat. Always love having you on the program. Thank you so much, Damon.
Thanks, guys.